So good evening, happy Sunday, and welcome to Coffee, Buses and Politics, or otherwise known as Three Middle-Aged Men with Beards. I took a new profile photo earlier and I uploaded to ChatGPT for some processing shenanigans, and it described me as a middle-aged man with a salt and pepper beard, which definitely hurt my pride. So, but actually, David has got the darkest beard. I mean, we're in between. I think our beards
See, there's
are ranked.
the difference between you and me. There's the difference between you and me, Stephen. I would consider it a compliment now at my age to be called middle-aged.
So that's true. Well, I am middle-aged, and tonight we are going to be talking about several things. But I thought I'd kick off with something that I've been involved with this week. It's still in draft form, so it hasn't been approved by the council yet. But on Wednesday night, HDC's overview and scrutiny meeting heard about a new strategy for the way that HDC is going to deal with empty properties. So a year ago, I'm the portfolio holder for Revs and Bens. So a year ago, the council decided that we're going to apply the maximum possible penalty to people who leave their homes vacant, or for people with holiday homes in Huntingdonshire. So I think it's like double the council tax. I can't remember the exact details. It hasn't started yet. It's kicking in April. But when we did that, one of the things that ONS came back with is that we had to do it. They wanted us to do it compassionately, which I completely agree with. There's lots of reasons. I think we've got a comment from Andrew we can put up on the screen in a minute. There's lots of reasons why properties are empty for a long time, and not all of them are because the owners are negligent. So what we presented, Sam Wakefield and I both presented on Wednesday night, was a new strategy. We have employed an empty homes officer so that people who've got empty homes will be able to contact the empty homes officer and get help and advice in how to bring those properties back into use. And there's like two purposes of that. Of course, there's a housing shortage, which is a problem. And we hope to tackle that by getting some more of those properties. I think I'll have to find the figures. I should have written them down, but there's quite a large number of empty properties in Huntingdonshire. But also that empty properties are pretty bad for neighbourhoods and communities. You can't, if your neighbours are never there, that's not cool. But also empty houses end up being derelict quite often, attract vandalism and crime. At that meeting, there was some pushback by some of the members saying that perhaps the enforcement part of a new policy was sounded a bit aggressive, but we were very clear that the policy's idea is that we want to help people first and only try and get extra council tax off people who don't follow our advice and deliberately leave their properties empty. And of course, it's not illegal to have an empty property, but the council does have the right to make money off those properties, and that's what we're going to do. Any thoughts on empty properties and how we should deal with it?
I've seen a few places that have these, and when they're done well, they're really, really good. And I think they're important when you think about the stress there is and the pressure there is to build new homes and everything else. If you've got these houses sat around, two things. First of all, it takes some of the pressure off the need to build new homes, but also what it does is it helps to get rid of this idea that we don't need to build new homes because we've got loads and loads and loads of empty ones. There's never enough empty homes to fill, and to fulfill the housing need for an area, but it helps to deal with that as well.
So, yeah, I mean, the thing is, you don't actually want no empty homes because you need some slack in the market. So not having any empty homes at all is actually has some issues. Obviously, the housing market at the moment is screwed in all different kinds of ways. The dealing with the empty homes is good. I mean, like I said, the numbers aren't going to be enough, but anything helps, and it gives people confidence, I hope, that it's being dealt with. I mean, ultimately, people still can just have an empty home if they want, but hopefully this will help them, deal with it. There's some in my ward, and actually, I know Alex has been door knocking with me in them where.
Well, on the empty houses, that's a waste of your time, surely.
Yeah. Well, you never know. Maybe the squirrels, they are.
If they're red squirrels,
of course. They cause issues because they do get, people they get broken into, they get used for antisocial behaviour and so on. And it's just that worry of having somewhere that, it's not nice to have somewhere that is boarded up next to your house, or somewhere with smashed windows and so on. And this is, I mean, without going all Rudy Giuliani, smashed windows, broken windows theory and so on, I think has something to it.
Aren't those, David, do you mean the ones obviously in your ward that aren't those like the housing association properties? Yeah, I wonder how it works with different, like whether it's private as opposed to housing association. Like I haven't really read into the detail of the policy, Stephen, I have to say, so I'm sure you'll enlighten me, but I was wondering if it's, how does it work if it's managed by a housing association or company as opposed to like a private individual having an empty home?
That's a good question, but I'm pretty sure that housing associations and houses which are owned by companies still have to pay council tax. So we can still apply those levies, I guess. But that's a good question, and I need to find out.
It's also not in the housing association's interests, if it is a housing association, to have it vacant for long. And it's a difficult one. When I was on the board for a housing association, one of the things they were really keen on was turning around vacant properties as quickly as they could. And it would literally be when somebody left, go through, do a quick check through, make sure from a health and safety perspective, everything's good, do a checklist of what needs doing, does the house need repainting, everything else, and then get it re-let, because it's not in their interest. That's revenue down the stream. And, you can soon get slack about it.
Go.
There is an issue that sometimes needs, like, to get a property back into sort of service. You need staff to deal with it. You might need some investment and some cash and so on. And it may end, I think on some occasions, like generally housing associations want to get things back into, housing back to being used and lived in. But sometimes actually the sort of, if you like, the cost benefit analysis has been actually it's not worth it. It makes more sense to leave it because of the costs of doing. And obviously the lead, at the moment we haven't got the budget. The longer you leave it, the harder it is to bring back into service.
So I think if you think, if you think about housing associations, they work basically. This all might have changed around, but they basically work on a 40-year finance program, and so they're basically looking at everything that all of their debts can be repaid over a 40-year period based on XX percentile of rental income. So if you stop getting renting from a number of properties, you start affecting that 40-year plan, and you call basically their whole financial plan into integrity if you get really slack about it. But the flip side is, the better you are at getting empty properties filled and getting rental income from them, the more integrity and the better you can make a use of that 40-year plan.
So I think I was getting something not even at that level. It's if you need a Sparks and you don't have one, because there's a shortage of trades, you can't, it can just take time to get a house inspected, repaired, and ready again. And sometimes actually it ends up you can get more houses back into service more quickly by leaving a particular house.
So I think Places for People, who is the main, I think we're their main customer. They provide most of the social housing in Huntingdonshire, have been in the news recently because they are disposing of some of their properties rather than because the cost of renovating them is so high, which I guess is probably a sound business decision. As long as you spend that money on a property you can more easily maintain and make more of a profit out of it, which I guess, other than serving the people who need the social housing, these companies have to be profitable, don't they? So that's one issue. I've got numbers here about how many properties there are in Huntingdonshire. So
yeah, I was going to ask that if you have the numbers.
There are 1,300 homes that are recorded as empty, almost 500 of which have been empty for more than 6 months. That's roughly one in every 66 homes, which is a fair amount. Now, when we say around 1,300 homes, part of the problem we have at the moment is we don't have good intelligence on where the empty homes are. So there hasn't been, up until now, any place where people could report empty homes. So one of the benefits of having an empty homes officer is that we're going to have a central point of contact now for reporting those things, and we're going to build up a database of where the empty properties really are. So I think 1,300 homes is probably a conservative estimate. So about 800 of those, 800 of those have been empty for less than 6 months. So perhaps those are going to come back into use. But the 500, well, 6 months isn't a very long time scale, because as anybody that's been involved in probate can tell you, it can take much longer than that. And I think what we want to do with this is to be compassionate. And so if you're going for a probate hearing, it can take time. And you don't get much support unless you want to pay for lawyers. And so actually having the empty homes officer is somebody who can give you a signpost about the things you should be doing and give you advice on how to get them back on the market quickly.
The point I put this up because this is this question. It's something that I've got personal experience with, which I don't want to go into the details of.
Me too.
But circumstances I know of with probate, and it's one of those many things where, you know, the whole crux of my own podcast is about broken politics. The probate system is one of them. You know, where everything takes an age to get done. The experience I've got is somebody that was left with a will. Perfectly legitimate will, perfectly proper will. Nobody ever challenged the will. Took them over a year to get through probate. It's you know, that person could manage that and deal with it, but can you imagine for somebody else the stresses and strains of that? But also, you're absolutely right. It stops you getting a house on the market. It stops you getting a house out for rental. All those things as well.
And it's bad enough covering the standard council tax, which you still have to do. I think you can get some discount for a while, but if you end up having increased council tax at a time where you're not making any income from the property, that's really difficult too. So I think the whole idea is that we don't want to punish those people who are legitimately in a situation where they can't get rid of a property. And hopefully the outcome of this policy is that we don't charge anybody any extra council tax, because eventually all those properties are going to come back into use. But it is a difficult time. So every quarter, I have to present our quarterly performance as a council, and we look at number of people in temporary accommodation. We look at number of people who are seeking our homelessness services, and those numbers, you know, we keep ahead of our target, but it's becoming more and more difficult because every year where we don't build enough social housing, and this council has delivered more social housing than any other council in any of HDC administration ever across the last 4 years, but it's still never enough. And so if you're not building enough new houses, you can't get people to move out of temporary accommodation, and so there's not enough places for new people. So bringing those homes back onto the market, and they won't all be social housing, obviously, maybe none of them will, but bringing more homes onto the market will help everyone. Go on.
Yeah. Can I just ask a quick question about this? It's not about this policy per se, but it is a question that I think we're going to get asked more and more in the next year or so. What happens to this policy if and when HDC get absorbed by another council?
So as an HDC, I'm quite proud of my record at HDC, especially in kind of social justice stuff. The council tax support stuff is important. This is important too. And the issue is we don't really know. And I think it's going to be a big mess, especially in council tax support, which for me is like our flagship policy, the thing I'm proudest of. If we end up joining with Fenland, East Cambs and Peterborough, all three of those councils have less generous council tax support policies than we have. There was a reform council in Suffolk or somewhere recently that have reversed their council tax support program because they thought it was too generous, and that people were taking advantage of it, as reform councils are likely to do. So it's a massive risk, and it's a massive risk to all of our legacy, and something that concerns me greatly, because if we end up joining up with Cambridge City and South Cambridge, which we certainly won't at the moment.
It's not on the table. It's not possible.
Option B, if you look at it might still be on the table. And according to our MP, it's the favourite, or your MP, it's the favourite option. So there is a possibility, but those councils are much more progressive. You know, they had better council tax support policies than we did. In some ways, we mimicked South Cambs and Cambridge City when we did ours. So it really does make a difference. And the same is true of things like free car parking. You can be sure as soon as the councils join together, they're just going to stick all the car parking charges up because it's a perfect time to do it, because you can blame previous administrations, can't you? And you can blame LGR.
Unless the free parking is coming everywhere as promised by the mayor.
It's the one thing that worries me about Fenland, because obviously we have free parking in Fenland.
The one thing that worries you about Fenland.
I'm not too fussed about Fenland being merged into Peterborough, because this may say Fenland is a dreadful council. It's got no imagination whatsoever. And the one thing, Peterborough's got horrendous problems in certain areas, and you know, some of the stuff where I feel like there's knowledge under the radar that we can't have as well really bothers me. But at least Peterborough's tried to do things in the past. Whatever the administration has been, they've tried to get things done, and they've tried to move the city forwards. And I just don't see any of that in Fenland at all. And so becoming part of Peterborough in that sense doesn't faze me. What phases me is the issues around Peterborough politics. And as I said, I believe that free car parking is a bonus to Fenland, but in that respect, we're different to Peterborough. So that does bother me. But in terms of the mergers, my view is that councils need to get on with things and not let the thought that a merger might affect it get them in the way of doing the right thing.
I mean, presumably having this, you know, at least it means that it'll be part of the discussion.
Yeah.
You know, so that's.
So how does it work in practice, Stephen? Because you said that you have now you'll have like one officer who will be the empty homes officer. I'm just wondering what is the capacity to actually assess this number of properties and actually be able to differentiate, as you say, which ones are still in the process of being sold or which ones are genuinely empty as such, and how we actually define that. I'm just wondering if one person can actually do that job.
We're just going to have to see, because we don't know just yet. But we've learned from other councils who have similar kind of single person empty houses officers. If it's overwhelmed, maybe there's a justification for adding more to it. But we've only budgeted for one at the moment.
All right, but they do exist in other councils, same format.
Yeah. So Sarah, who's going to be empty homes officer, has been in contact with other councils and done loads of research. And I think it's an excellent paper. So I'm quite excited by it. I've just checked on Google, and apparently housing associations do have to pay council tax on long-term empty properties, but they don't necessarily have to pay it on short-term or short-term vacancies or when they're working on big renovations. So I think there are some exceptions, but ultimately they have to pay the same as everyone else.
I'm just thinking about it. That would be, and in case anybody from my employer is watching, don't worry, I'm not thinking of going anywhere. That empty homes officer job would actually be quite an interesting role.
So previously, and I think, I'm not sure if we've employed anybody in this role before, but previously I think we used to employ like ex-police officers to go around inspecting properties and knocking at the door, which I had a chat with to one of our officers and said that sounded pretty ineffective, and she disagreed with me and said some of those people are really, really good at finding empty properties. So I don't know how it works, but I think having a place where people can ring up and report, because I've been making some social media posts this week and probably uncovered at least 4 or 5 empty properties that people were concerned about. I'm sure the more this becomes public, more and more of these properties will become available. And so absolutely, the first intention of this policy is that we work with the owners to try and bring the properties back and try and give them all the support they need. I don't think we want to punish anybody. And so ideally, nobody would ever get charged council tax premiums, but there will be people who want to keep their homes empty or have second homes. And then absolutely, I think that we should have the ability to charge them extra council tax. And in the case of maybe derelict properties or properties which are causing a public health nuisance, we also have powers like compulsory purchase, which we can go through, which is part of the pushback at ONS. People saying those powers seemed, which are granted by the government and by statute, not by this policy, but those properties seemed over the top. But there has to be some ultimate sanction. And I think, the point I tried to make to the ONS committee is anytime you get involved with CPOs, you're going through a legal process, having to present your case in front of judges. Unless you've got a really, really good case, then you can't get them done. So that's actually almost a safety check in itself.
I mean,
if you know about CPOs, Martin, do you?
But also, if you've got a strong case and somebody isn't, by and large, what you would want to do is have such a strong case that you didn't end up going through the courts, and you end up settling before then. And you know that's the way most councils try and use, as I understand it, try and use CPO, is to have it sat in the background but never have to use it.
Yeah, well, it's a fleet in being. The thing with the, I mean, two questions. One is, can that apply to commercial properties as well?
No, it cannot. But the paper, and I'm not sure if it was taken out, an early draft of the paper talked about high street retail auctions, which was a power half brought in by the previous government, but I don't think it's ever been used anywhere, which councils could apply for and then put long-term unused commercial properties up for auction or force.
So I think I'm right in saying that actually all that needs is some secondary legislation, and at some point the current government is going
community rights to buy stuff. I think.
Yeah, am I right in that it doesn't actually need primary legislation?
No, I don't think it does. I mean, I haven't looked into it in detail, but I'm sure. I think it applies on certain types of properties, not to everything.
Yeah, but I mean, as I've said before, it's something I'm in favour of, the community right to buy, the high street rental auctions, and so on. There is the thing is with the. This is, I really don't know what I'm talking about here. Not that usually stops me.
That's not unusual.
I was going to say I'm a middle-aged, middle-class white man. I do wonder sometimes if compulsory purchase orders aren't being used enough. I mean, if you just look at how long it took to deal with the Falcon in St Neots, and now the what's it called? 111 High Street, the old Woolworths in Huntingdon, and also, there are other buildings around as well, which are, sort of similar stories. I don't know. I just don't know how the law is set up, and I know it's difficult and takes time, but I do wonder if those are cases where actually it would have been appropriate to be a bit more assertive with the use of compulsory purchase orders. I mean, the old Falcon. So the Falcon in St Neots, I know, and it's complicated, and you've got the boathouse at the back and all of that. That had been abandoned for a few years, or empty for a few years when I moved to St Neots.
So I know something about that because I'm on the cabinet now, and because I was quite a prominent critic of the previous administration. So Ryan Fuller, the previous leader of the council, Conservative leader of the council before this administration took over, had said, I think, in the press that they were considering CPOing the Falcon, which caused a frenzy of people like me saying, why don't you do it? But the reality is, as he found out, and we subsequently found out when we were in administration, we talked about doing the same thing, that it's in fact very, very expensive and very, very difficult to do. It really is a last resort, and it's also quite difficult for the council to spend public money buying derelict buildings unless you've got a very good business case to justify it. So the reality of that is that it's very difficult, and we were told from legal advice that it was never really an option from very early on.
So the advice when I dug into this, because we had, I mean, obviously there's a couple of examples within Whittlesea, but one of which is where the George Hotel is now. That was originally falling apart, and it was falling apart. Is that the one on the square? Yeah, absolutely. If Wetherspoons hadn't come in and bought that, nobody else would have done it. But the pushback was that and they didn't CPO this, and there was another building in Whittlesea where similar happened for years and years and years. And the advice we were given was they wouldn't CPO it unless they had a guarantee of a buyer at the other end, basically. So you'd CPO it. So once you've got the CPO through, straight away you're selling it on. You've got a contract sat there ready to go to be signed and passed on. So you basically got a guarantee that you are going to sort the problem rather than just inherit a problem and have it stay as it is.
So there's an interesting thing there from Nick Stibbs. I think we should pick up on that question in a minute. But the on the compulsory purchase, okay. So, and as I understand it, that you can't just do it because you want it. There's got to be a business case, all the rest of it. But I think sometimes it might be, even if it's quite expensive to do, it might be worth doing just to demonstrate that you're willing to you're willing to do it, you know, in the district. Or, you know, whatever the area is, and you can't just sit on a building, you know, I mean, for decades in some cases. And I think there is also, you know, there's a I don't know how you value it, but there's a social importance as well in not having rotting buildings in prominent places on, you know, on like the George in Wiltshire on the square. You know, actually these are all market squares, aren't they? The George, 111 and the Falcon. Yep. And whether, you know, they can, I don't know, it's difficult, but it's
but it's also true of you know, if you're a resident, you don't want that house next to you either. You know, and that's equally important, you know, for all sorts of reasons. You know, not least, you know, issues around rats and stuff like that as well. You know, the problems we've got with fly tipping, where you can easily see somebody using an empty property as a place to do some fly tipping, and we know that's happened elsewhere. So
or squatting, or drugs, or whatever. There's loads of crime associated with those places always, which is you know, part of the reason for doing it.
And I don't know if anybody put this quote from Nick up, but this is the point about this. It's all right saying that they're paying for properties that are literally not used by non-occupants, but there is also the potential for that non-occupancy to be a cause and a reason for a burden on the council taxpayer as well. So, you know, there's a flip side to that argument, Nick, although I accept the point.
So there's a really interesting thing there as well about how we think of tax in that, you know, I don't think when the government is designing a tax, it usually thinks of, you know, the sort of connecting the spend with where it comes from, but people do. So you get this with, so there's no such thing as road tax, and there hasn't been for almost 100 years. It's vehicle excise duty, and it's an excise is just a tax because we can, basically, and we want the money. Same, you know, the tax on booze is an excise. People think of car tax, road tax as something that should go to be spent on roads. It doesn't. It goes into the consolidated fund. You know, partly that's because hypothecating taxes is difficult. But just to satisfy your inquisitiveness, David. 1937. I was right. I mean, because the other one is the you know, there's nothing as permanent as a temporary tax. So I think the income tax was brought in as a temporary measure to pay for the Napoleonic Wars.
We're getting into another conversation here, but yeah, I mean, it's a reality about the way government is at the moment. Government is just looking around thinking, if I need to raise taxes, how can I do it without raising income tax and national insurance and whatever. It's that is sadly the world we're in.
Yeah. But that does make it, if it's like, oh, you know, there's the idea that council tax is to pay for the services. It's not. It's the way that councils have been given to raise money is council tax, and it's a really interesting one, because that's not, as Nick says exactly there, that's not how people see it. You think I'm paying my council tax to, you know, to get my bins done or whatever it happens to be, but it's you know, I just think it's interesting the way we sort of conceptualize these things.
Yeah, Kerry's got a point about it's not completely related to this, but support for homeowners on low incomes, like home improvement loans. I guess there's people who well, their properties are maybe derelict or in disrepair because they generally can't afford to fix them, which is a difficult situation to be in. Especially if they're so bad that they're vacant and they're attracting council tax premiums as well. But again, that's a sort of place or sort of situation where we'd hope the the empty homes officer would help people and give them support and give them advice in trying to get around those obstacles. But yeah, there's definitely economic barriers to sometimes doing this work, and that's why we have to treat every case with compassion and every case on its own merits. So I think, you know, part of the argument at overview and scrutiny, and we're going to take this, there was a vote to change the recommendation that we remove some of the enforcement policies, which interestingly, because we've got a new voting system at HDC, it's an electronic voting system which we used for the first or second time, is you can no longer see who votes for what. You can only see the totals, which I think is an interesting situation, because at county council, you can see who votes for what, can't you? Whereas at HDC, you only see the bar graphs of this percentage of people, this number of councillors voted yes, this number of councillors voted no. And I find that, I mean, I know we could always request a recorded vote.
Isn't that better though, because you don't see who else and you don't influence each other when you see the name on the screen?
Because I wanted to see who on our side was because it was a 5-5 vote, 5-5 tie on that recommendation, and it went to the chair, who's Kath Gledo, who voted to used her casting vote to keep the report as it was and reject the recommendation. But, you know, looking around the chamber and trying to work out who on our side is voting, well, not against administration because it's overview and scrutiny, but it was very interesting. And I think, I personally think that it feels like a secret ballot, and that all democracy should be taken in the full light of public scrutiny, and you should be able to at least look around the chamber and see who voted for what. Because some of you people, yeah, who love to whip, yeah, all of you three love a whip, didn't you? Especially Martin. He talked me for hours about his love for the whip the other night in my flat.
This is meant to be family entertainment.
I was just going to talk about that exactly top topic because of what Kerry said. There's a reality with this, and which is that politics is harmed by the way that those whips are sometimes reported, and this is where I have an issue with it. You know, when you start saying X voted against Y because of so-and-so, or X voted against Y, what you do is you forget the fact that there's all sorts of other stuff going on underneath there. There may be other reasons underpinning, you know, whatever document's coming through that you feel you can't vote for it. What, you know, not the reason what that somebody's specifically caring about. And it's also true, you know, that you do have whipping underneath all that makes it really difficult on some votes. I'd still like to see the power of the whip relaxed at council level a little bit sometimes, but I sort of get it. And if it really is that important, yes, you go for a recorded vote.
So if you're interested in hearing Martin's extensive views on whipping, I can recommend downloading, when it comes out, the first episode of Office Politics with Lara and Stephen, where we interviewed Martin for an hour about his political career, about his politics, and lots of that came around to whipping, didn't it? And it was a really interesting discussion.
Well, it's non-stop an hour talking about whipping and whips.
And it's available on OnlyFans.
Yeah, exactly. It's got an explicit tag on it, so be careful.
So I'm just going to throw it out there. I actually think you can do it quite quickly. I think all votes should be recorded.
I think so too. I think so. And I think maybe so this system has been changed, and we didn't, you know, this is the first time I'd seen it. I tried to do a point of order because I didn't like it, but then I was told that I'm not in the committee. I was only presenting to the committee and I couldn't do it. But I think it's odd. But I mean, I guess that's all that's going to happen is I'll just have to record a vote every time. So
let me give you an example just to push back on this, because I do think it's important that people think about the other side, even if they don't agree with me. I am still held to account by certain people for voting in favour of the County Council's Minerals and Waste Plan way back in 2010. Okay. And the reason for that is because of the mess that is Saxon Pit in Whittlesea. Which you know, you might have seen some reports in the media about and everything else, and I did some BBC Cambridgeshire about it, saying that, you know, we seem to be at long last heading in the right direction. But underneath, you know, yes, a minerals and waste plan, you're never ever going to get to a position where you can oppose that at county council against a whip, not if you're a member of a major party. But underneath that is the bit people don't understand, is the work that's done and the conversations that were done, not just by me, but more by my fellow councillor, because I was on the cabinet at the time, about the assurances about how well it would be monitored and looked after and all those sort of things that get you to the point where you go, yeah, okay, you know, at the very least, at least I know this is going to be looked after. The disappointment with Saxon Pit is that all those assurances counted for nothing. But
which is always a problem as a councillor, isn't it? Is you make decisions in with your, you know, in what you think are the best interests, and then if the projects are mismanaged downstream, then what can you do about it? And then you're responsible for it. So it's difficult, isn't it? It's one of the things you have to account for. It is impossible though to whip anybody if you can't see who's voted for what, can you? Because how are you gonna extract any or apply any retribution to a errant voter? Yeah, if you can't tell who they are. And I was looking. I mean, not that I'm trying to influence over your scrutiny, but I was looking to work out who voted for what.
And there's a little bit of me that quite likes that. In fact, there's quite a lot of me that quite likes that.
I mean, the other discussion around like the whip and how it's applied is there's a range of issues from like, I don't really mind either way to I feel strong about a particular issue, but I discussed in group and I got the reassurances I need to be able to support this, even if I'm not 100% on board. And then there are issues on the other side that this is the hill I will die on and I will not vote for this regardless, like option A, for example. So there's like a whole spectrum of issues and a lot of the things are in the middle as well. A lot of times people have concerns and they raise them and maybe they get reassurances or something gets amended or changed or the wording gets a bit changed and they are then satisfied. So like often we don't really see what goes on behind the scenes, but there are absolutely issues where it's like, this is definitely something I will not consider regardless, like voting for option A, for example.
But I have on option A, I have good information that the two members of the administration, one voted against and one abstained, have been kicked off committees, is what I've heard, well, by one of the members themselves. So there is punishment, although getting kicked off committees at Cambridgeshire County Council, I know they're very useful, but it would save an enormous amount of time sometimes, depending on which committees you're on.
Well, of course, I mean, in a way, there is, especially in a political grouping, there is that level of collective responsibility. So of course there's repercussions that you should assume them if you're actually voting against the whip. So that's just how it works outside the independent world, Stephen.
But not all parties whip as well is the other thing. There is a prominent local party that doesn't whip as well. So I couldn't survive in a party with a whip.
I used to deal with a UKIP group that used to say they never whipped, and they always voted together almost on every single issue. And that's the important bit, Kerry. It does vary a little bit party by party. And if you've got a big enough majority, you can give a little bit more leeway. But when majorities are tight, you should be in no doubt, Kerry, that by the time something comes to council, whatever happens in the debate, important decisions have been whipped.
I think that there hasn't been any whipping in the joint administration HDC. We've only signed up to allow ourselves to be whipped on the budget. Yeah, but I've always thought that if somebody wanted to whip me on the budget and I disagree with it, I would simply leave the administration is what I would do. So, you know, but I would use that as leverage to get, you know, to get whatever, or try to get whatever thing I disagree with moderated or changed. So it does work both ways. But we haven't, you know, 4 years of administration. The word whip has been mentioned, but it's always been treated with some offence by the independent members of the council, who are numerous at the moment. So we've managed to get through 4 years without doing that, and it's been quite successful, I think. Shall we move on? Because that's went from empty homes to a favourite topic of this podcast, which is whipping. And a bit unscripted, I've just remembered when we're talking about LGR, which is something we always end up coming back to, is that a couple of weeks ago, Peterborough City Council decided that they were going to cancel their elections. They were up for third up elections, I think, as an executive decision. Now, I was looking at TikTok the other night, and the leader, is it Shabina Qayyum? Is that how you say your name? Was complaining about false news or negative news being spread, because there was a motion to full council to ask them to change the recommendation and to write to the minister and said that they didn't want to have an opinion, or that they changed their opinion. That was defeated comprehensively. And so she was saying that it demonstrated that the council was in favour of the elections being cancelled, and I used it as an excuse to criticise her and Peterborough City Council for, without knowing all the details. To be fair, it was a TikTok comment, but with Huntingdonshire, South Cambs, and Cambridge City going ahead, I think it's a pretty bad look for Peterborough to be cancelling. And so Shabina and I had a bit of a disagreement across a few comments on that TikTok post, which I'm gonna post a link to now, but don't use it as an excuse to pile in. That's all I'm saying. And because I was probably wrong anyway, because it was a late night TikTok.
I mean, I definitely want pile in, but I think in a way you can argue that every council, of course, has their right to go through their process and vote whether to postpone or to go ahead. The issue that I have is, because government didn't take the decision themselves, which I think they should have done, every council does it differently. So for me, to compare a vote and a full debate like we had in HDC taking place in a full council meeting, as opposed to I think in Cambridge City, only the leader writing the letter without necessarily having a meeting, it's a huge variation of how you can get that decision. So I think it's not really comparable, really. Some councils had cabinet meetings, some the leader just decided in consultation with their group and so on, and some had full council meetings like HDC, and they're all okay in the sense of actually reaching that recommendation. So to me,
but it's a weird thing, isn't it, that the decisions are taken in objectively similar councils for different reasons. And the reasons we were told was is what the Constitution says. I during my speech thanked Sarah Conboy for giving us the opportunity to take our decision in the full light of public scrutiny, because I think that was really important. And I think Sarah probably, the letter was written from the minister to Sarah Conboy as the executive leader, and she could have responded. But the approach she chose, which is the same approach that Sarah chose for LGR, was to hear the voice of the whole council. And I really appreciate that from her. And I also appreciate the fact that those two meetings, the LGR debate and the election cancellation debate, were two of the best meetings I've been involved with, and two of the meetings where there was a large amount of agreement across both sides of the chamber, although there was lots of hard work going, no whipping, but lots of disagreement and lots of arguments and lots of tantrums being thrown by me behind the scenes.
I just want to, what I do want to do is put the alternative viewpoint about why you might want to cancel elections. And I don't disagree with the point that it's a bad look for Peterborough. But the reason for it, for me, you get a huge amount of turnover of councillors at elections. I think typically it's about a third. But if you've got a party on the rise or two parties on the rise, which is where we are at the moment nationally, that turnover is absolutely heightened, and you will end up with a huge turnover of councillors, and therefore a real inexperienced bunch of councillors negotiating and dealing with local government review. And the most important thing you could argue is not that you need to get that you need your elections this year. It is that by the time you get to holding your elections the year after, you're electing people into a council that is able to function properly. And so,
but isn't that more of the case of, to me, a lot of this is around actually candidate selection and the party selecting people who could do, obviously the questions around training as well. And I don't doubt that experience, having 10 years of experience of a council will give you a broader view of council services. But at the same time, you can have new people who are actually very capable if you select them correctly, I guess.
But remember going back to Duxford, go on, Martin.
I will say this absolutely, that you can have, but you have absolutely no guarantee of that whatsoever. And I have said to, when I was a Conservative Party member, I used to say, I would much rather we didn't put a candidate up for a seat than put an idiot up. But the Conservative Party would rather put an idiot up and see him win.
So
that's where we are. I just want to say, I've gone through all that. Broadly speaking, I do think that the elections should go ahead, but also I would say I'm not so daft as to think that part of this wasn't Keir Starmer thinking, actually, my neck's on the line in May. The less Labour councillors who are likely to lose the seats in May, the less likely is I'm to lose my position as PM. And I'm sure somewhere along the line, that debate is going on, even if it's just within a few people's heads.
And it's also not a good look for a Labour executive leader, who said to me on the comments, so I've not got any self-interest in this decision because I'm not for election this year because she's up for thirds and she's up in 2027. But like if she's going to lose members of her administration because Labour are doing really badly in the polls at the moment, that's a leadership in council. So there is self-interest involved. I just want to go back on the previous point because Alex, remember when you and I were sat in RAF Duxford for the first county council meeting?
Yes.
I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing next meeting, and by like the fourth meeting, I was by the county council. So that there is really a steep learning curve. And Martin, when we were having our in between our talk on whipping the other night, was telling his story of how you rose to leadership of the county council, and basically you were dealt a fatal blow in the meeting which you were elected, when the Lib Dems in the minority administration, new councillors, voted to go back to the committee system, which a year later ended your leadership and basically your political career, didn't it?
I just want to get it straight, just not to just blame the Lib Dems. It was everybody but the Conservatives. And once they had made that decision that the council was going to move over to a committee system, legally, there was no way that could be reversed. And there were no end of times during the year that followed. I had councillors that voted because they were whipped, by the way, to get rid of the cabinet system, coming up to me and saying, "We've made a mistake, haven't we?"
And do you know what? If we'd been asked that question in the first meeting of HDC, because like most new councillors, who'd never experienced a cabinet system, I was in favour of the committee system because it's fairer for backbenchers and things. But having served on the cabinet for 4 years, I can now see that cabinet is a better system of government. And of course, with the unitary authorities coming in, there won't be any more committee systems because the government is changing the rules. So cabinet is the only way forward. And I think, it is.
I'm going to say that my influence solely that's done that.
So what, mate? What did you say?
It's my influence that's done that. You know that.
Yeah, it must have been. But I feel quite sad that was probably one of the reasons why you weren't the leader of the Conservatives when I was in the council, is because that dealt a death knell to your leadership, and things might have been.
It was absolutely that made me decide to walk away. It wasn't being in a minority administration because I think I was making that work. It wasn't that. It was the fact that a minority administration with a committee system was just going to put the brakes on the council, and I still say that it did.
So I'd just like to say thank you to Shabina. I don't know if she's watching it, but if word gets to her, for at least biting back to my late night TikTok trolling of her as well. And we have
enough trolls on social media, Stephen, for you to add. I mean, seriously now, I think it is. I'm very in favor of the elections going ahead, but also because I actually don't think the LGR time frame will be exactly 27, because I think if you're thinking about consulting on all the options and some of the further communication from that and further work around that, there is a likelihood where it won't be exactly May 27 shadow authorities. And I think it's a very strong argument for pursuing with elections regardless. But saying that, I know that some councils actually don't have the same capacity as HDC has. I think HDC is a overall very well-run council, and I do totally believe the paper that there's no implication on other services.
One of my fears about Fenland is that it's not a very well-run council. It's very, very. Its funding is very, very poor, which means it doesn't have the same office. It also struggles to recruit, partly because of location, and it means it's not going to have the sort of influence it needs to have as negotiation and reorganisation happens. And I think that's important. It's also worth saying the point you made, Alex, I think is right, which is that a lot of councils probably won't make 2027. And I think if Huntingdonshire is split in two, and when you think you've got to get revs and benefits sorted before you move to a new council, I think then you start talking about the fact that we might be talking about 2028.
Yeah, I think especially under any of the split options, or I would say even option E, because it's not really in the line of the initial guidance. I think it will take a bit longer to implement anything that is option D or E, that are both on the table, which is like fine, but like I don't think we should just say, well, this argument that like, oh, elections will be taking place next year anyway, let's not have them this year. I don't think, for me, that's a strong argument for for postponement.
So talking about a poorly run administration, next topic is the leader of a very well-run administration, which is Greater Manchester Combined Authority. The mayor of that is Andy Burnham, who has stuck his hat in the ring, I think, today to become potentially the leader, or leader of a less well-run administration, which is the current government. So this is all broke today, isn't it? So this morning we got the news that Andy Burnham was applying for selection for the by-election, and we heard this afternoon that the NEC had rejected him. Do things really work that quickly at the NEC, or is there some kind of political messaging?
The time frame is very short, given the urgency of actually
on a Sunday
electing the candidate.
How are those decisions made? Do you know?
David knows all about the party rule book. I am afraid I'm not that much of an expert.
So you've got the NEC, which is quite large. You've got the 10 people who've got specific officer roles on it, and they were delegated to make that decision. Basically, he wasn't actually being invited to be the leader or anything. This is for the MP, the by-election for what used to be Manchester Gorton. It's called something else now. The rule book was changed actually relatively recently, so that if you're a mayor or a police and crime commissioner, you have to get party sign-off first before you can stand for for Parliament or something.
So that's saying whoever recommended that policy, Keir Starmer should put him in the House of Lords straight away.
So that's it, Denton and Gorton. Thank you, Kerry. I mean, so that's what the decision made by the NEC was.
But if he was in the House of Lords, he could be Prime Minister, technically, couldn't he? Because there have previously been
not anymore.
Not anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's good. I mean, who was the last one? Lord Salisbury. I mean, I think the people were complaining quite a lot when Haig was Foreign Minister Foreign Secretary from the Lords. I struggle to see it happening, I have to say. I mean, it's not impossible in the British Constitution because we can do whatever the hell we want, but I think politically it would be challenging.
The last one was indeed Robert Gascoigne Cecil, the third Marquess of Salisbury. So yes, you're right. Lord Salisbury was the last one, which was in 1902. So it hasn't.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any comeback to that situation realistically.
Do you think, more importantly, do you think this is a good move by Andy Burnham? Is he pitching to start a leadership challenge? Is that why he's doing it? I'm almost certain he must be, because why would you give up a very successful role as being the mayor of Greater Manchester to be potentially a backbench MP if you got elected?
So I think that you could make an argument that politically this is the best. This is a good outcome for Andy. Being blocked, strengthens him for next time. I actually think the other thing that would have been interesting would been if he'd said, "Look, I am interested, but I've been elected to do this job that I love in Manchester, so no, I'm not putting my name forward." That would have been interesting. So there's a couple of things. One is you've got, I think Zach Polanski has said he's running.
Yeah.
And did I see that Zia Yusuf, or was that speculation?
Yeah.
George Galloway. So it's going to be, and the election is like, Andy Burnham will be very popular and so on. Is he guaranteed to win the election? No, he isn't. So that's one thing. But then you'd have the by-election in Manchester for Metro Mayor of Manchester. That's a big prize. Who I don't know Manchester politics well enough. If there's an obvious person who would take over, but I think not with the sort of status that Andy Burnham has. So so in a way, this is a bit like the local government postponing elections thing. You can make a very good argument for the NEC's decision. The issue is people look at the whole thing and say, well, yeah, but that's not what you were thinking about, is it? And that's really difficult, because you could once that's how things are being sort of debated, the effectively you've decided that there is no, you don't have much confidence in the sort of trustworthiness or veracity of the people you're dealing with, and that is a problem in itself. It's going to be interesting to see who is the Labour candidate there, and will they win?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the other thing, of course, is if Andy was, got into Parliament, okay, what then? The gift of whether he's in, the Prime Minister decides who's in the government, period. And is being a backbench MP with a hostile leader going to be that useful, or would he go straight in and try to get the 80 signatures to trigger a leadership election? The other problem is, let's say that, look, and let's say that Andy Burnham somehow became an MP, got the 80 signatures, triggered a leadership election, and won, and became and was now the Prime Minister. That doesn't actually change a lot of the issues that you've got. The economic situation is still difficult. You've got the issue of the manifesto. Do you? I mean, I think I said at the time, I hope I did, that the commitment not to raise taxes on working people was a mistake. And does he stick to that or not? Because if he sticks to that, he's got exactly the same problems that Rachel Reeves has got at the moment. If he doesn't, you've got he's going to be getting bucket loads of criticism.
He could get Alistair Campbell in and sort out the comms, because that's a big part of what's going wrong with Labour at the moment. Is that you can't polish the turd, but they're not even trying.
Yeah, but the issue for me about Keir Starmer is a number of things he's done, I think, on the international stage, I don't think have been bad at all. Because the problem is with that, he's having to tread, the diplomacy, and he's having to do the diplomacy dance, which, the other leaders don't have to do. They can say and do what they want, pretty much. And the problem is there isn't a narrative that strings together what Labour's domestic policy is about. And so you see him flitting all over the place. And that, to me, is the issue. I think Andy Burnham has been done a favour. I think he made a mistake, is my view. I think Andy Burnham is excellent, by the way. But I think he could just bide his time and he will become Prime Minister. I think that's true. And I think or certainly as leader of the Labour Party, and then circumstances dictate, whether he can achieve that. But those are can you imagine if he had stood in a by-election and lost, and then in the subsequent mayoral election, Labour had lost? He would never, ever have be forgiven.
Yeah, I mean, there's that likely situation as well. And also, I think it's just from a party perspective, of the NEC has to consider the wider implications on the party as well, is just the cost of those elections. Having worked on a mayoral election before, if you have especially with a new candidate, how much would it actually cost to run an election with actually having, obviously, fighting against reform and so on. So I'm sure all of those implications would have been considered as well in terms of the capacity to actually run it properly.
The other thing is, say it all worked in his favour, and next May he becomes Prime Minister on the basis that that Labour has some disastrous local election results. If you look at the recent history, prime ministers are getting between 2 and 3 years on average. Yeah. So he becomes prime minister, 2 to 3 years, he's out, and that's it. He's done. That's the reality. That's, if you look at what's happening to Keir Starmer, and it's often not entirely the fault. I do think Keir Starmer's constantly shooting himself in the foot, but it's not always their fault. It wasn't Theresa May's fault she got ousted. Theresa May got ousted because Boris Johnson was ambitious, and Boris Johnson did whatever it took for him to get and become prime minister.
So there's.
Go on.
Sorry, no, I cut across. There is something that, and this is something that I've noticed recently. I know Alex has had it on her Facebook. It is there is the sort of fire hose of negativity, and at least some of that is being done by states who are hostile to the UK. With the interests of in the interest of damaging the UK, and it's not that they're attacking Labour particularly. It's that they want to sow dissent and that sort of thing, just make politics not work.
I agree with that, except that 13 or 14 U-turns is not being done by hostile states.
Oh no! Sorry. No, you're right. I mean, it's possible to have a bad hand of cards and still play it badly, there's
But it's true, David. Like, I actually noticed. I mean, like, we just got an email from like the council around like kind of the latest debate, not hate briefing and info and so on, saying like if we want to flag any issue. Actually, that's something I noticed literally like in January. Obviously, like I campaigned on super controversial stuff before. I got plenty of like racist, xenophobic comments. I'm like used to all that from like days of single issue campaigning. But the level, just the number of stuff, of comments that you get now. And I know some people are real people have those views, and you're very welcome in the free speech country to have those views and to like throw insults at me in my comments. But a lot of them are actually not in the UK, or like they're the same people spamming the same screenshot, which is like proactively spam. So like just the post I did today, I have now about 20 comments of the same guy just screenshotted like a phone screenshot of like every single anti-Labour like video or piece. And I'm like, obviously I'm not going to engage. Like what do you expect? Is like in normal face-to-face conversation, it's like you basically shouting at me for 20 minutes, like spamming the same image. I mean, just a comment saying like, I will vote Reform Labour out is enough. Like, you don't need to put 20 things on my Facebook, right? Like, it doesn't make me more or less likely to campaign. But yeah, it's an increase in salience of this issue. And this is like cross politician posts. I saw it on some of the Tory posts as well. So it's not only Labour stuff.
But mainly but your Facebook account, has what's convinced me that there are bad forces at play. Because what was the comment that nurses they've escaped? Nurses.
Yeah, and they believed you as well.
Well, I wrote it on as a joke, and loads of people started agreeing with me, and it was just like loads of bots, loads of people with questions, and like
it was hilarious that like they actually thought you're one of the people. You're like, you should join the WhatsApp amplifying community on the Reform UK.
But I do think that there's a couple of things that I just said. I think Starmer's done himself no favors whatsoever, and it's that lack of a coherent strategy. I think is a big part of it. I always said right at the start of, and you'll remember me saying this, I hope, which is that Starmer doesn't have to be popular now. He just has to be popular when the next general election comes. But the problem is he's gone too far. You can start to see little what they call green shoots in terms of the economy at the moment, and that's what the Labour Party need for the next general election is that turnaround. The trouble is it's too late for Starmer. Starmer is a busted flush, and so the Labour Party is, in my view, is going to have to replace him by the time the next general election comes. But we go back to the same thing. If it happens now, whoever comes in has got 2 to 3 years. That probably means they're done at the next general election.
There was an article in The Economist today saying that immigration is heading in the right direction, or depending on what your view of the right direction is. But for the people on the right, immigration is dropping because of all of the many obstacles and negative PR we put in place because of it. And so immigration might not be a big issue by the time of the next generation.
I mean, it might be in a
That's
different
Trump.
well, it might be in a different way because I mean, one of the interesting things with immigration now being like predicted to be below 200k net is actually the fiscal impacts of that in the economy. And actually you might end up with like a black hole due to like having actually too low net migration, depending on the types of migrants coming in. And that will be like, can be a real issue. And because it's still not zero, it still won't satisfy people who obviously want it to be zero, but it might also like impact economically in the next year's budget, depending on how you are.
Because if we want to compete internationally, we have to attract the best people from around the world. And I work for a big employer in Peterborough, along with some fantastic Indian engineers from around the world. And I don't know why they want to come here. I don't anymore because of our attitude and hostility we show to people who from other countries.
Yeah, I mean, that's the issue. Like a lot of the reforms actually make people who are, contributing, like just in terms of fiscal contribution, because obviously you have different types of social, economic, and cultural contribution as well. Actually, for example, lengthening the pathway to settlement will probably make wealthier people leave first. I mean, obviously, in my view, because if I am on a pathway to settlement of 3 years and my partner is now on 20 years, I might choose a country if I have the means and obviously the resource to do so. I might choose to work in another English-speaking country. Whereas if I'm stuck in a low-paid, exploitative employment, I have no choice but to stay and just deal with it. The fact that my partner's path to settlement is now 20 years and mine is still 5. So I think like there will be a lot of impact actually on people who have the choice on where to work, actually potentially live in the UK. And it's definitely not what the policy is perhaps intended to target.
But we also have a demographic crisis. We don't have enough people of working age paying taxes to pay for our elderly population, people like Martin.
So there's also this thing with immigration is I don't think so. So legal immigration massively outstrips illegal immigration. I think I'm right in saying that the biggest single cause of illegal immigration is visa overstaying. I don't know if this is still true, but at one point, I think this was for London, the country that provided the most illegal immigrants was Australia, which was people overstaying the 2-year visa that they could get. Immigration is falling dramatically, but a lot of people don't see that, and this was one of the things the issues I had with Sharman and Mahmood's policies on immigration. It does not matter how tough you are on immigration, right? Forget the morality about it or things like good economic planning or whatever. Just on the sort of raw politics, Reform are always going to be happy to say we should hit the if you say and every immigrant has to be hit with a stick, Reform will say, well, it should be a shitty stick. You always get that. And there's no sort of shared agreed sort of idea of what's actually going on with immigration.
Yeah,
and to pick up on the point Alex was making, we've paid lip service at best to the benefits of immigration. Nobody is going out there in a sustained way and talking about the why immigration is good. Now, one last thing. Given that we are a country of 68 million, we have a preposterously good university sector. You've got more world-class universities in the UK than say in Germany. It's quite remarkable. Those depend on have always depended on having students and faculty from overseas. Even more so recently because of the problems with funding and fees and so on. And there seems to have been nobody going out there and saying, actually, this is something we're really, really good at. Maybe we need to protect this particular industry. Nobody's been going out and said, actually, one of the things that's quite good about immigration is I don't know, just from something that appeals to me, you've got every bloody type of food you want. that sort of thing. And you know, you can still go out and say, look, there are issues with immigration, but unless you're actually going to challenge the sort of the broad narrative that immigration is bad all the time, you're not going to get anywhere.
But I would push back a little bit on that. I didn't know that's absolutely right. The points you make are absolutely right. So I'm not pushing back. But there was an argument made way back in 2010, I believe it was, that I think is valid, which is that the way immigration was happening and has been happening has been a blight on productivity in British industry. And I do think there's a strong element of truth in that. But there's another hypocrisy within the system, which is that those very same people who don't want anybody to migrate in this country are exactly the same people that want us to keep an absolutely slashed foreign aid budget, so we can't invest overseas to disincentivize the need for migration. And that bothers me a lot.
That's really frustrating, because of course you have like people advocating for like 0% of GDP foreign aid spending, like also advocating for zero, like, you know, irregular migration, and like stopping all the boats. Like, in order to actually tackle like irregular migration, you need to invest more in the countries that actually like will need the support. I actually visited Jordan last summer, and seeing some of obviously the work with refugees there, like it really opened my eyes as to how much, you know, like £1 actually goes there, as opposed to like trying to like spend it on enforcement when already people are in desperate circumstances at the border.
If you read Rory Stewart's book, he talks about this quite a lot, because obviously he had the foreign aid budget, but also he was working in a similar field before he actually entered Parliament and everything else. Really, really interesting bloke, Rory Stewart, and exactly the same. But if you look at what they've done with the foreign aid budget as well, which is, I think they're looking to roll the foreign aid budget into the defence budget, it's the same thing. You know, we're in a situation at the moment where the world is a really unstable place, as we've seen a lot in the last few weeks. And, you know, we're in a position where we need to start investing overseas to get economies growing overseas so we can win friends, basically. Because we want people on our side, because if they're not on our side, they're going to be on the side of China, or they're going to be on the side of Russia. And, you know, foreign aid is a path towards that, potentially. And again, zero foreign aid is really, really acting against our interests. Now is a time when we really, really need it.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing, of course, that's going to, one of the things that is going to cause, or is already causing, but will cause even more so, migrant flows, is climate change.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it is just not arguable. And so, you know, dealing with climate change, so both reducing carbon emissions, but also, you know, things to mitigate the impact of climate change, you know, will make a difference. But you know, similar sort of hypocrisy, you can't, you know, you can't talk about it in those terms, because people will say that you're, you know, woke, liberal, tree hugging, you know, whatever. I was involved. I was very tangentially involved years ago with a thing called the NATO Multiple Futures Project. I've got the final report over there somewhere. Something being done out of SACT out of Norfolk. What are the challenges that NATO need to, or NATO members need to be dealing with? One of the big ones that kept coming up was climate change. You know, and you know, this was Old Dominion University, and that well, you know, actually, in a lot of ways, the US Armed Forces have been quite progressive in terms of racial integration in the US, but I don't think you necessarily think of the United States Navy as being, you know, communist, pinko, liberal, tree hugging, all the rest of it. And they're like, no, this is a serious issue. Sorry, yeah, I'm going off on rant mode.
What I love the irony of this situation is that America's imperative to put troops and build bases on Greenland, and Trump's imperative as far as Greenland is concerned, is caused by climate change. And so, I really do think that is. I quite like the irony of it.
So on the Greenland things, going through the 1951 US-Denmark agreement on the security of Greenland says that the US has to consult with Denmark, but it can put any installations it wants. It can open new bases. You can build harbors. You can put any troops there it wants. The US basically has to send a letter to Denmark, wait a few weeks, and it can do whatever the hell it wants anyway. And that's sorry, I just find it monumentally frustrating, as you can probably tell. And this just going back, the sort of general discourse. And I'm honestly not having a go at all, Alex. People know I like trains. I was very happy to go and hand out leaflets about nationalising the railways. Unfortunately, I have to use Facebook for work, so I'm quite often going in to do things. And it's like every time there were, the laughing face emojis coming up. And I know I shouldn't react to it, but it's just when you've got hundreds and hundreds of comments and reactions, it's like, bloody hell, this is props to you, Alex, for being able to deal with it. It's exhausting.
Well, the thing is, it puts off people. Like, I'm just more concerned about, if you're a new candidate now thinking to stand for election, especially for anyone that's not the Reform Party, like whether you're young, let's say young Labour, young Tory, young Green, whatever, and you get this stuff online, probably it puts you off from posting in the first place. I mean, personally, I actually, first of all, I mute my own notifications, because if you are actually watching and thinking I read through 200 of your spam, images, you probably are having too much free time on your hands, and I don't, because I'm actually doing my casework in the evenings, actually doing my job as a counselor, and not spending my time on the sofa spamming random strangers with 30 images of the same stuff. But sometimes I do look, and honestly, I do have a response to every single thing. So it's the same kind of boring stuff. Oh, you have to start looking for a job. Well, I have a job. Guess what? I'm a working age counselor. I have a job alongside the council. Or oh, you have to queue up at the jobs. That is job related stuff, which people don't realize that most counselors actually do have a work alongside the council. Anyway, that's really strange to me. And even if I didn't, so what, you can find another job after, why is no shame looking for a job in general, but the snarky comments of oh, you have to look for a job. So I changed my job so many times, in the last 15 years of being in work and so on. Is no shame being unemployed and looking for a job and then finding a job, or people making jokes about different types of jobs. Again, there's no shame working in any kind of type of job, as long as it's work. People be look for a job stacking shelves and so on. I have friends who work at Tesco's and so on, and well done to them. There's no shame whatsoever. You need people across the job market for the society to function. So that's to the guys who are commenting that. And then the insults. It's if you really think, if you put on I don't know, oh, nurse, they have escaped, or whatever, or clowns, or idiots.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, whatever. No, not to you, Stephen. It was a joke, but I loved it. But do you really think I look at this and be oh, I'll just resign my seat now? Or I'll never be involved just because you put 20 comments? If anything, it makes it an entertaining evening. So please bring it on.
So it's the real debate there, because it's difficult to see any legitimate interaction, isn't it, when it's drowned out by bots and or paid contributors. It's pointless, and it spoils the platform. So
yeah, but you see, unfortunately, especially more women, female MPs and ethnic minority MPs in particular, both men and women, getting a lot more of those comments and being targeted as well. And I see on MP posts of different parties as well, how much of those kind of, not only bot, but just people who are, I know some people are real people, and I know you're spending your evening just commenting on every single political post you find on Facebook, and that's fine if that's what gives you pleasure. But I always say, hatred is always a reflection of yourself. And if you're in that situation where you're spending your evening spamming hateful messages, I think it's time to reflect on your own life and what you can improve in your own life to stop being so hateful all the time.
So I didn't have any bots commenting on my post.
Hey, Alex, look, I'm going to therapy, all right? I'm trying to get help.
If
No,
there's any bots,
it's no shame like seeking help. If you find yourself like too angry in the evening, it's no shame actually asking a friend to listen or like asking for help. It's like actually very important to have that message.
But if there are any bots watching, can you please target my account as well? Because I could do with
He's bored in the evening.
Mine are so silent, they're boring. And I've been trying to troll people, nobody's trolling me back. So what are you going to do? So good.
Agree.
Right, we're at an hour and 20 minutes, as long as we normally
one of the things that bothers me about it is I really, really like the debate, the good debate that happens on Facebook and stuff like that. And when it does, Facebook is absolutely a force for good when it works that way. The trouble is, it's all that other stuff, the hateful stuff, and all the, it just gets absolutely in the way. And it does. Sadly, it was true of UKIP, and it's true of Reform. It seems to be, if it's not bots, that's something else. If it's not bots, it seems to be people of that ilk, and I.
If you don't believe it's bots, take a look at any of Alex's posts, and you will be convinced immediately it's bots or paid people who are trying to.
The thing that concerns me is that's true, but people get drawn up in it, and there's people I know from Huntingdon who I've interacted with as a counsellor who've got caught up in this and suddenly started just like slating me, and I've messaged them and saying, hang on, you messaged me the other day to, and it's like, what's going on here?
It's 20. Well, it's an hour and 20 minutes, and we're going to call it a day. We might have a special guest on next week. We might even have two special guests on next week. We'll see. But we'll see if we can arrange them.
It will be on buses next week for sure.
Well, or whatever news breaks this week. Are we going to say we're going to do it at 6:30 next week? Yeah, we try to.
Yes.
Yeah.
See you next Sunday.
We'll see you next Sunday. Thank you for listening. That was a fun one. I enjoyed it. Goodbye, everyone. Have a lovely time and enjoy the NFL playoffs.
Yeah. Take care.
Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Cheers all. See ya.